Very interesting English story. Once upon a time, in a small village by the sea, there lived a young man named David. David was known for his curiosity and love for stories. He spent most of his days helping his father, who was a fisherman. But David always dreamed of seeing the world beyond the village. Every evening, after a long day of work, he would sit by the shore and imagine himself on great adventures, sailing across the seas, meeting new people, and learning about faraway lands. One day, while David was walking through the market, he saw an old man sitting under a tree. The man was surrounded by children, and he was telling stories of distant places. David was intrigued. He had never seen this man before. He quickly walked over and sat down with the children to listen. The old man spoke of a magical city hidden deep in the mountains. This city, the old man said, is not like any other place in the world. The people there are wise, and they know secrets about the earth and the stars. It is said that whoever finds this city will learn the greatest wisdom. David was fascinated. He couldn't stop thinking about the magical city. That night, as he lay in bed, he made a decision. I will find this city, he thought. I want to learn the greatest wisdom. The next morning, David packed a small bag with some food, water, and a blanket. He told his father about his plan, but his father was worried. The world is big and dangerous, his father said. You are still young. Why don't you wait a few more years before going on such a journey? But David was determined. He hugged his father and promised to return one day with great stories and knowledge. Then, with hope in his heart, he left the village and began his adventure. David walked for many days. He passed through forests, crossed rivers, and climbed hills. Along the way, he met many people. Some were kind and gave him food and shelter. Others were not so friendly, but David stayed strong. He knew that every step was bringing him closer to the magical city. One day, as he was walking through a thick forest, David heard a voice calling his name. He looked around, but he didn't see anyone. The voice was soft, almost like a whisper in the wind. David, David. Curious and a little scared, David followed the voice deeper into the forest. The trees were tall and their branches formed a thick canopy above him. The light was dim and the air was cool. As he walked, the voice became clearer. It was coming from a small clearing up ahead. When David reached the clearing, he saw a strange sight. There was a beautiful woman sitting by a large rock. She had long, flowing hair, and her eyes sparkled like stars. I've been waiting for you, David, she said with a smile. David was confused. Who are you? He asked. How do you know my name? The woman laughed softly. I know many things, she said. I know that you are searching for the magical city. But the road ahead is difficult. Many have tried, and many have failed. Are you sure you want to continue? David nodded. Yes, he said. I've come this far. I won't turn back now. The woman's smile faded, and her eyes became serious. Very well, she said. But you must know this. The path to the city is not just a physical journey. It is also a journey of the heart and mind. You will face challenges that will test your courage, your kindness, and your wisdom. If you are not ready, the journey will break you. David felt a chill run down his spine. I am ready, he said, though his voice was not as strong as before. The woman stood up and pointed to a narrow path leading deeper into the forest. Follow this path, she said. But remember my words, the journey is not easy. David thanked the woman and started down the path. As he walked, he couldn't stop thinking about her words. What kind of challenges would he face? What if he wasn't strong enough? But no matter how many doubts filled his mind, he knew he couldn't give up now. The sun was setting when David reached the edge of the forest. Ahead of him was a tall mountain, its peak hidden by clouds. At the foot of the mountain, there was a small village. David decided to rest there for the night before continuing his journey. In the village, David met an old man who invited him to stay in his house. As they sat by the fire, the old man told David more about the mountain. Many people have tried to climb it, the old man said, but few have succeeded. Some say that the mountain is alive, and that it chooses who can pass and who cannot. David listened carefully. He had never heard of a mountain that could think. But the old man's words reminded him of what the woman in the forest had said. The journey is not just about strength, David thought. It's about something more. The next morning, David thanked the old man and began his climb. The path was steep and the air was thin. David's legs ached and his chest burned, but he kept going. He thought about the magical city and the wisdom he would gain if he reached it. After hours of climbing, David came to a large rock blocking the path. He tried to move it, but it was too heavy. He looked around for another way, but there was none. For the first time, David felt hopeless. How was he going to get past the rock? Just as he was about to give up, he remembered the woman's words. The journey is not just physical. David closed his eyes and thought deeply. Then an idea came to him. Instead of trying to move the rock, he would climb over it. David carefully found handholds and began to climb. It was difficult, but slowly he made his way to the top. When he reached the other side, he felt a sense of pride. He had overcome his first challenge. David continued his climb up the mountain. Every step was harder than the last. The air was colder, and the wind blew strong against him. But he didn't stop. He knew the magical city was waiting for him at the top. As David climbed higher, he saw another challenge ahead. A narrow bridge stretched across a deep canyon. The bridge was made of old, thin wood and looked like it could break at any moment. David's heart raced. He had to cross, but one wrong step could send him falling into the canyon below. He stood at the edge of the bridge, thinking about what to do. Fear crept into his mind. What if the bridge broke? What if he fell? David remembered the words of the woman in the forest. The journey is not just about strength, it's also about courage. Taking a deep breath, David decided to trust his instincts. He stepped onto the bridge, 1 foot at a time. The wood creaked under his weight, but he kept moving. His heart pounded with each step. When he finally reached the other side, he felt relief wash over him. He had crossed the bridge, but his journey was far from over. As he continued to climb, the weather grew worse. Dark clouds gathered in the sky, and rain began to fall. The path was slippery, and David had to move carefully. He slipped a few times, but each time he got back up and kept going. After a long, tiring climb, David reached a plateau near the top of the mountain. There, he saw a cave. Inside the cave was an old woman sitting by a fire. She looked wise and kind, with long silver hair and eyes that seemed to know everything. David was cold and tired, so he asked if he could sit by the fire. The old woman nodded and motioned for him to sit. "You've come a long way," she said, her voice gentle. "But the hardest part of your journey is still ahead." David warmed his hands by the fire and looked at her. "I'm trying to reach the magical city," he said. "I want to learn the greatest wisdom." The old woman smiled softly. Wisdom is not just something you find, she said. It's something you earn through experience. The challenges you've faced so far are only the beginning. The true test lies in the choices you make. David thought about her words. He had already faced many challenges, but he knew she was right. He had more to learn and more choices to make. After a while, David thanked the old woman and continued his journey. As David approached the final stretch of the mountain, he saw something incredible. In the distance, through the mist and clouds, he saw the outline of the magical city. Its golden towers rose high into the sky, and the light from its walls shone brightly, even through the stormy weather. David's heart filled with hope. He was so close. But just as he was about to take another step, he heard a voice behind him. "David, wait!" It was the old woman from the cave. She had followed him. David turned around, confused. "What's wrong?" he asked. The old woman looked at him with serious eyes. "Before you enter the city, you must answer one final question," she said. "The answer will determine whether you are truly ready for the wisdom that lies within." David nodded, though he felt nervous. "What is the question?" he asked. The old woman looked deep into his eyes. "What is the most important thing in life?" David thought about the question. He thought about his journey, about the people he had met, the challenges he had faced, and the lessons he had learned along the way. The answer wasn't easy, but after a moment, he spoke. "The most important thing in life," David said slowly, "is love. Love for others, love for ourselves, and love for the world. Without love, wisdom means nothing." The old woman smiled and nodded. "You have learned well, David," she said. "The city is yours to enter." David felt a wave of relief and joy. He thanked the old woman and turned toward the magical city. The path was now clear, and the light from the city guided him forward. When David entered the city, it was even more beautiful than he had imagined. The streets were lined with trees, and flowers bloomed in every corner. The people were kind and wise, and they welcomed David with open arms. They shared with him the knowledge of the earth, the stars, and the universe. But most importantly, they taught David that true wisdom is not just about knowing many things. It's about understanding what really matters in life: kindness, courage, and love. David stayed in the city for many years, learning and growing, but he never forgot where he came from. One day, when he felt he had learned enough, he decided to return to his village by the sea. He wanted to share his knowledge with his family and friends, and to help them see the beauty and wisdom in the world around them. When David finally returned home, his father welcomed him with tears of joy. "I always knew you would come back," his father said. David smiled and hugged his father. "I have learned so much," he said. But the greatest lesson of all is that love is the most powerful wisdom. From that day on, David became known as the wise man of the village. People came from all over to hear his stories and learn from his experiences. And David, in his heart, knew that the real magic wasn't in the city he found, but in the love and kindness he shared with others.